Hey, we are live here in the upper gallery at the Hoboken Historical Museum. And this is Friday night, and it's Upper Gallery Artist Talks. We're so happy to introduce a new exhibit in the upper gallery. Uh, and Carol Halebian uh, is our guest tonight, and she'll be talking about her photographs. And this is a real special treat. The exhibit does open on Sunday from 2 to 5. We'd love you to be here, meet Carol. But tonight you're going to see some of her photographs in the exhibit, or most of them, I should say. And the exhibit runs until September 4th. And we always do, if we can, schedule a talk like this so you can get to know the artist. This is on YouTube Live. You can make comments. You can text in comments to Carol. And then this will be archived on YouTube, Instagram, and pretty much, no, not Instagram, sorry, but many other social platforms. But YouTube is our main platform. So I'm going to just say, Carol, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm trying to think how we met. I think you reached out to us. You said you had this photo in your, maybe in storage, a large photograph,
Right.
and that it was of a shoe shine boy that you had photographed here in the late 70s on Washington Street.
Right.
And it just so happened we were doing an exhibit on Washington Street. So I said, bring it on over. So we did include it in the exhibit. So tell us how you found, how did you come to Hoboken to photograph?
I grew up in New Jersey in Bergen County, and I always knew about Hoboken, and you would be approaching the Lincoln Tunnel and you'd see that you go through the tunnel, you go to Hoboken. So I was always wondering, like, where was Hoboken? What was Hoboken about? So in 1976, it was a presidential election, and it was my first day off from work. I was working at a photography magazine, and I said to my cousin, like, let's go check out Hoboken. And so we came and parked and walked around, and I said, this is a really interesting place. And, the thing about New Jersey, it's so packed with so many counties and so many kinds of, places that obviously there's other cities, but I thought this was very unique.
And so when you started, did you start photographing that day?
Oh, yeah.
Or
in fact, the picture of the two boys in front of the gate was from that first day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And other impressions from walking around town? Does it come back to you when you look at these pictures from 35 years ago?
I felt that it was, like I say, it was in a time frame that seemed like progress or change was very slow. It looked like I would have imagined a place could have looked 40 years ago. And when I was a student, I went to school in London. And London also, there are parts of London that looked like the war had not ended that long before. And so Hoboken was, I would say, very authentic.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, there were a lot of mom and pop stores. There were a lot of kids on the street. There were a lot of casual interactions. But also within a couple of years, you could see that there was also a lot of change going on. And there was all this, talk about gentrification and Renaissance, and where you could see places crumbling and places being renovated, almost like right next to each other. So
Right.
Obviously, things were changing rapidly.
And did you feel comfortable walking around?
Totally comfortable.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I didn't.
And it's before video for the most part. So carrying a camera around town would sort of inspire people to pose and, like, show me kind of feeling from people, or did you have to really cajole them?
I would be wandering around and I would maybe walk up to somebody, or I would see something happening from a distance and I would approach, very slowly. And I think in the beginning I was only using one camera and 3 lenses, so I wasn't like that weighted down.
Right.
And I I wasn't hiding what I was doing or anything. I was made myself obvious, and sometimes I'd start photographing, and you could tell within seconds whether somebody wants to cooperate or not cooperate. And most people were very friendly, even people that were not English speakers. They just felt. I think maybe I came across as very non-threatening, and so it was friendly.
Right. And after walking around Hoboken, like how many times do you think you came to photograph in Hoboken?
It's hard to know exactly because I was working at this photography magazine, Camera 35, and so I had a regular kind of 9 to 5 job. So this is what I would do on the weekends because I was basically working as a photo editor, and I had photographers coming in all the time with different projects that they were working on. I didn't want to lose track of not continuing to photograph like I had done as a student. So this was kind of like my outlet. And when I was, going to school in London, I had, never been out of the United States except for Canada. And the teacher said, "Oh, everyone's very excited. You're in London and you're visiting Paris and you're going to Amsterdam, but never forget your own backyard." And I felt like, well, this was kind of my own backyard, but it was, it's different, but close.
And do you think if you were photographing in New York at the time, it would have been the same experience? Or like New York, there's always more going on, and maybe you're a little more concerned, not safety, but just like you might be in someone else's space and that kind of thing. I mean, was it more comfortable photographing in Hoboken?
Yes, because it was, even though it's a small city, it was like a small town. And so I liked the scale of everything. You could always see the sky. There was a grid, so it was easy to walk around. You knew exactly where you were at all times. And there would be all kinds of like events, festivals, and things like that going on.
Right. And so do you think you photographed here over 10 times on weekends?
Definitely.
So,
yeah, it was over a period of years.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I started in 76, and I was trying to think like, because eventually I left the magazine and I was freelancing, and so I wasn't able to continue working in the same way. But I think one of the last times I came was in '84 when Reagan came here.
Oh yeah, for St. Anne's.
Right, exactly. So that was during his second term, the reelection.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, the president is here. That was.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think part of that was he and Frank Sinatra came also.
That same day?
Yes.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And I think the story was that Reagan polled weak with women, and St. Anne's is the patron saint of women. So his press people, marketing people, strategy people said, "But you got to go to this big festival." And Hudson County being really democratic, but they said, if you go Sinatra, who had gone Republican in a sense, that's going to really create a big media fury, which it did. And so I sort of remember that event of Sinatra and Reagan going to St. Anne's. And it was a little controversial. I think it was the Iran-Contra time period, so people were picketing about it. And do you remember photographing the Reagan event at St. Anne's?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember being outside. There were a lot of people. I mean, part of it was like people get so excited about seeing the president. It's not even a question of do you support this person or not. It's just that, oh, my God, this is like such a major celebrity.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and Hoboken's very small, so we don't see that many presidents. There's a few historical events, but for the most part, yeah, they're going to go to another bigger city like a Newark or Trenton, or maybe not Trenton, but Newark for sure would capture more eyeballs, as they say. That's
you were asking me about why Hoboken. I actually went to Patterson. I think I went to Newark. I went to a couple places, but I just decided that I thought that Hoboken was the most interesting place because it had a fascinating history, and I felt very safe, and it
was closer, probably.
And it was easy to get to.
Yeah, definitely. And you actually brought some camera with you. Can you hold that up and maybe describe it?
This is the camera that I was using in the beginning. This is a Nikon camera, a Nikkormat, and I used this lens a lot. I like using a wide angle lens because you were able to get close to somebody, but also show their environment at the same time. And so, I mean, I used all different lenses, but I liked this kind of not terribly wide angle, but wide angle lens.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is all pre-digital. There is a light meter, aperture and shutter speeds, you
Right.
know, and different versions of automatic, but
Mhm.
it's a whole different world,
Right.
and kind of scary in one's lifetime how much photography has changed.
Mhm.
And I'll just hold this up. This is your film of choice at the time, right? Tell us about this film, which was legendary in the day.
Well, most of National Geographic was, the photos were done with Kodachrome. And this would be called a brick because it's 10 rolls. It's all packaged, shrink wrapped together. And in picking a film, Kodachrome was the most stable of the color films. There was, Ektachrome, Fujichrome, different kinds of film, but I loved the colors of Kodachrome. And, there was the Paul Simon song, which is really...
I was just thinking of it.
It's really accurate about, it's very bright, vibrant colors. And I don't know, it might have been hard to make a print pictures if they had not been Kodachrome, because they would have been, a lot more fading.
Right.
So
I guess the other film of the day was Ektachrome, which was always known for going a little blue.
Right.
And the colors were not nearly as vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll talk about the Kodachrome world, like sometimes things look better in Kodachrome than reality. And still a lot of people, your work, I think you would say falls under street photography, that genre. And a lot of people in the 70s and 80s were still doing black and white, just because of the control and different aesthetic and so on. So when we saw your pictures in color, which is the way we see, we were so excited because I think we did an exhibit maybe pre-COVID of the Mecca brothers, two brothers who photographed in Hoboken a lot. And they use Kodachrome also. But for the most part, we're seeing black and white photos. And some people would talk about Hoboken being kind of a black and white city, like meaning, I don't know, just like a little like film noirish or realistic or whatever. And they love doing it in black and white. And I think I sort of bought into that. But when I saw the Mecca brothers photos and your photos, just because predates my time here for the most part, I just thought, wow, in color, and it makes it's in a funny way, a more direct experience and reminds you of the color in Hoboken.
Part of it also was practical because I didn't have a darkroom at that point.
Right.
And slide film is not forgiving. I mean, you really had to have good exposures. And I would not have had time to print. And I would have, and it was great to shoot the film, send it off, get it back a few days later, and be able to look at everything right away. I was a photojournalism major, so it wasn't as if I didn't know how to print. I did know how to print. I really didn't have access to a darkroom. And I'm a decent printer, but I'm certainly not a master printer. I mean, some people who are not even photographers are master printers because that's an art in and of itself.
Agreed.
So it just seemed like I loved Kodachrome. It seemed like the practical thing to do. And to me, I mean, I can understand how someone could say they thought black and white was more suited to Hoboken. But for me, I thought it was more color. Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's all, personal, subjective experience, but they look great. They look great. Maybe we'll take a look at a few photos. We'll bring one up from the exhibit. And this is on the exhibit card. And I should mention many of your photographs are chronicling, documenting Hoboken moments on Washington Street. And that sort of worked well with our main floor exhibit. So that's just like a spin on it. But most people will go, where the hell is this? There are little clues of how it looks today. But what did you like about this photo when you saw it? When you saw the scene, I should say.
I just like the fact that there were so many people on the bench and they were sitting very close together,
Right.
closely. And it seemed really friendly.
Mm-hmm. It is, I mean, there's something, you could read different things into the photo.
I mean, I don't know if they were waiting for the bus or they were just there to enjoy each other's company.
That's a great possibility. And they do seem, I mean, when you sit that close to someone, you do sort of have to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
And now we'll say, coming out of a tough period with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing you would do is sit on a bench like this, probably
Mm-hmm.
now,
Mm-hmm.
because you would realize you're invading other people's space.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to say you're right. These people, maybe the guy with the cane, maybe he's not part of the group or something.
Or he's with the woman sitting next to him.
That's true, right. But they seem like they know each other.
Uh-huh.
And I think I'm pretty sure this is Washington Street.
I think so.
On the east side of the street, and we can see the pink tile from Schoning's Bakery on the far right, which now is Carlos Bakery, which is kind of known for the Cake Boss and the reality show.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people are really remember Schoning's, the sugar buns, or they really will hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been Carlos for many years now. And El Gallo, a lot of Hoboken was Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
And especially the time period you're
Right.
photographing, and that market is totally changed now too.
Mm-hmm.
And the bar on the corner is totally different. I believe it's a Thai restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's. I think it could be my favorite shot of the show.
Really?
Yeah, for some reason, and that's directly across from City Hall,
Uh-huh.
where everyone used to just hang out on the benches too. And so to me, that is so Hoboken. And that's a great question. Are they just looking for a park bench to have discourse, or are they waiting for the bus, or both? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But down there, I'm just thinking, so would you generally try to photograph on more of a overcast day where colors would sing a little more, or you just kind of you're just reacting to the moment, and if the light works, it works?
Well, I love saturated color,
Mm-hmm.
but when we go to other photos, you'll see that it's a certainly bright light because that was
Right.
an event that I was at. I like overcast, but sometimes like you have to work with what's there. And
Right.
I'm there on that day, and
Sure.
I designated that day to be in Hoboken, and so I just made the most of
Right.
the situation.
And you would never really pose people, would you? I mean, you'd kind of work a little bit, but not like you wouldn't ask,
Well, these
someone
people,
to get out of the frame or something.
no. I think probably like I would have seen this from a little bit of a distance, and
Uh-huh.
I said to myself, "This is a good scene,"
Right.
and I would approach and try not to be too obvious. I mean, it looks like the man on the right side obviously I think is noticing me.
Yeah, as the woman is on the far right too, I think.
But
Yeah.
I don't think that they were, obviously they were okay with it.
They're comfortable.
So I would go and maybe take some pictures, and maybe, who knows, maybe a bus went by or something
Right,
happened, and,
right.
and then maybe they started to get up from off the bench.
Sure.
But I saw this as just a nice moment.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Again, another one of my favorite ones too. Do you actually remember taking this picture after? So let's figure it out. This is at least 40 years ago.
This
Right.
was at a street fair, and at some point I have to really organize these pictures because I think at the Kodachrome put a date on the picture.
It depends how you had it
year.
processed, I think.
So I would
but-
I could maybe look,
Right.
but this was like a typical kind of weekend, street event
Right.
where the stores would bring out their merchandise,
Mhm.
and there might be some kind of parade or, event.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. And this is definitely Washington Street. Most of those stores have all changed. There is still this type of feel of people putting racks out and, inventory to promote shopping and so on. And do you remember, was this kid like doing this, jumping over it repeatedly, or was it just anything? I'm just sort of curious about the memory that a photographer has this many years later.
I think that I saw him do it, and I asked him to do it again.
Mhm,
That's what I
mhm.
think happened.
It sounds
Because I don't think, I saw him and he was like very happy to be jumping over a cone.
right.
So,
Right. So do it again. Do it again.
right.
And it looks like, I don't think I noticed it before, but that cone was to prevent a slip and slide lawsuit, right? I mean, the sidewalk is in tough shape right there.
It's amazing, like, because I walk down Washington Street from the station, how pristine everything is now. You don't see this kind of sidewalk anymore. And, almost every single storefront is occupied.
Yeah, we've had some ups and downs, and just because of the pressures of maintaining a business during this time. But people often talk about how dirty, I guess, the city was. Just people just didn't really pick up, and disrepair and things like that. So, do you remember it as being a little rough, a little worn, the streets? You're saying, or?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. There were, broken windows and things. Actually, in New York City, it was the same thing at that time.
Right.
Like Ford said to New York, drop dead. I remember when Central Park was a dust bowl. So this was something that wasn't just Hoboken; it was other places too.
Right.
And so some, basic services were not really being maintained. Even, even the New York Public Library had, issues. And I remember when Bryant Park and Union Square, they were also, in hard straits.
Right. Yeah. I was going to bring up the, drop dead New York City thing where Beam was trying to get money and, was sort of shot down. We always say that whatever happens in New York generally will happen in Hoboken. So if there's an economic downturn in New York, it's probably going to spill over here too. And New York has, got much stronger over time, and hence so did Hoboken. So,
in spite of that, it was still at this point in time a very vibrant place. People were engaged. It wasn't a place where people just walked past each other on the street.
Right.
Kids interacted. And I thought in a way it was great because the sidewalk was a playground, playing games and, lots of bats and balls and, riding bikes and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah. Here's Eric Kammer. 1 Mile Town is ideal for photography. Eric grew up here and has a real passion for the town. And so, yeah, thanks, Eric. Eric's been an interviewer on the program and also the subject of the interview. So we have some loyal listeners. Great. Yeah, definitely. There's our boarded up windows for sure. We're still trying to figure out the location of this one. And someone just kind of noticed, what's in the background? It's not RIP, like rest in peace, is it? Or is it a name? I'm having a little trouble figuring that out. But we think this is just a block away from the museum on Washington Street, and it's totally been transformed. Some of those storefronts are actually residential apartment buildings now. We've applied. We're actually going to go over there and see if we can line up the cast iron structural piece there kind of in the middle after the green just to see it. But there's still a lot of kids in Hoboken, but your photos really show the kid element.
Oh, thank you.
And they love to be photographed, right? I mean, kids are always great to photograph.
During that time period, there was a lot of graffiti. It was really popular.
Right.
People just graffitied, everything.
Sure. Yeah. And once in a while we'll have an outburst, but to see graffiti on Washington Street now, I don't know. There's like too many people out. There's the cameras. I hope it doesn't happen. And then there's graffiti, and then there's graffiti, right? So cool. It's from the same shooting.
Right.
So, would you bracket a lot when you photographed
I
different exposures?
really tried not to bracket too much because I was afraid of missing the picture.
Mm,
So I really tried to meter it and really, get a sense of what the exposure was going to be, and then just try to just go with it
right.
because things are changing second by second.
Sure.
And I'm looking at the three girls, and then I don't really know exactly what's going on to the left.
Right.
So I'm trying to get off as many frames as I can in this situation.
Right. Right. And kind of a testament that you could get in close and not really, shall we say, distract them. They're not like, I think you like to get in close and witness things, but you don't want it to be all about you photographing them in some cases.
Right. And also, once they see that you're there and they're used to you, they don't care anymore.
Right.
They go back to what they're doing.
Sure. Sure. No, that's true. If you hang in there long enough.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And I guess I should ask some of your favorite photographers who photograph on the street. Who are the people that come to mind when you were, in a sense, coming up?
Well, someone, talked to me about Helen Levitt and look at him, and I did. And, when I was a university student, Eugene Smith was God, basically. But I also really liked the Robert Frank book, The Americans,
right?
Because I just felt like it really got to the heart and soul of the United States at that time in history. And, he's not an American, he was Swiss. So maybe that helped him to define what was iconic.
Right.
And
actually, we always like to reference two really important photographs in that are actually taken in Hoboken. And he started his trip cross country in Hoboken. He was in New York, came across, probably took the path like you did, started photographing down by City Hall, and the shot of the American flag across the faces of the people looking out the apartment window, kind of like the nondescript American, and the flag is the symbol, is one of the shots. And the other one is the city fathers at City Hall in a 1955 celebration for the centennial of the city. And we're just so proud that, Robert Frank, and then other photographers from Hoboken you were talking about earlier today, who comes to mind?
Well, it's amazing that this mile square city produced Dorothea Lange and Stieglitz. And Dorothea Lange, they both produced some of the most, important photography of the 20th century, and especially like when you think of single images, because during the Depression, there was something called the FSA, which was the Farm Security Administration. And the purpose of this group of photographers was to document what was going on during the Depression. So this picture of migrant mother with the two children, that I think is the most...
Could be one of the most recognized images, right?
Yeah,
for
right.
sure.
And then the Stieglitz is the steerage picture of where you see a ship and you see the different classes of people with this kind of bridge in the middle. And when you think about Hoboken and the proximity to New York and Ellis Island, and, this was a city that had, a lot of Germans and a lot of Italians and a lot of Hispanics. That's an extremely important picture historically.
Right. Sure. And I mentioned before that Stieglitz was very proud of his Hoboken creds. And the famous quote of his was, "I am an American, I'm from Hoboken." Sort of that cross-section of immigration history. And even though he's from a pretty wealthy family and German immigrant, but he saw it as, this was a city of, whether you want to use the term melting pot or something else, but people from so many different parts of the world. So yeah, we're lucky to have that. So you were talking about Helen Levitt as quintessential street photographer, Eugene Smith, who had that kind of black and white spiritual kind of nature. And anyone else come to mind?
Do you know William Kline? the photographer?
Yeah, sure.
He was a phenomenal street photographer.
Right.
I think he might actually still be alive. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
But he did this in different countries.
Right.
And he
Germany
really
and
captured the essence of each country.
right.
And I when I worked at Camera 35 magazine, I actually met him. And he gave me a book, and I recently came across it. He had written me a note.
Right.
And he did several books and has, was very widely exhibited.
Sure.
But I don't know, maybe because he didn't really live in the United States, he was not, other street photographers seem to be more popular. But I think he's a phenomenal street photographer.
Right.
94 years young.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Sure. Yeah, I've seen a few retrospective books, so I thought he was around, but I wasn't sure. And so what makes a good street photographer?
I think you have to be genuinely interested in the place and the subjects. And you have to want to interact with people. And I also felt like I was documenting a certain period of time, and that I wanted to see how things would develop over time, because it was clear that things were going on in Hoboken at that time. And we were talking earlier about fires, and you would be on a block, and then you come back a week later and there would have been a fire. And there were, changes were happening rapidly because Hoboken was getting money from model cities, and there was a lot of questions about what the future was. And when I was reading things that I had written, my 20-something self, I thought that Hoboken would turn into a totally, white, upper-class, yuppie-fied city, because it seemed like that was the direction that it was going in. But fortunately, that didn't really happen. It's still kind of mixed. It changed, the character changed a lot. But I don't think any place, New York City, you look at it, it's not going to stay the same forever. It's always going to be changing.
Right.
So.
Right. Some people might disagree, that it has, it's definitely gotten wealthier, and there is diversity here, but, whoever's here, it's costing a lot more money. So generally the new resident might have diversity, but they're bringing a lot of money to the situation. So, in the late 70s and 80s, you had a lot of artists coming to Hoboken, and a lot of musicians. We're probably not going to have that type of energy anymore, just because the rents are so high. So unless there's some grandparents involved or trust fund or whatever, the kid right after college, which is sort of my story, is not going to find Hoboken, might not even find a Hoboken attractive, but they certainly couldn't afford it. They're if they're gonna come to this side of the river, it's going to be more Union City, parts of Jersey City, and things like that. So it's interesting, but it's interesting to hear that from you.
Yeah, I think it keeps shifting. I also think that, when you have these developments, like in New York, if somebody wants to do something, a project, or they do a trade-off where you have to, give back something.
Right.
And I think in a certain way it's unfortunate, because that doesn't seem to really have happened here as much as it could have. Like I was watching this video and someone was saying, well, somebody made a building at 16 units and one of them was affordable housing. Right. That ratio is just way too low.
Yep.
So,
was that Delivered Vacant?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that film has that's what, mid-90s. So that's got, we're 15, 20 years later.
But it also got into how people who owned, houses, they saw that this was a way of unloading their house, and this was an opportunity for them to, sell at a very high price and to get out. Yeah,
there's many stories about gentrification, and if you paint a broad brush, you're in trouble. Each situation is different. And Delivered Vacant, a really important documentary for Hoboken, by Nora Jacobs, and we sort of say everyone should watch that, and it's a feature, it's a documentary, but it's feature length, so you got to put in some time. But if you're interested in Hoboken's history during the 1980s, early 90s, you got to watch it. We do have portions of it here one could watch, but you can contact the filmmaker and purchase a copy also. So I'm glad we got to mention that. So we'll look at a couple more photos. This is really the photo that we first saw of yours. And, you know, I hate to say it, we just didn't know you were out there. So when this came our way, we were so excited. And we did try to identify who this kid is, but we have not found him yet. But I believe he's out there. So I'm hoping this program, this exhibit will identify that. And what do you remember from this situation?
This was a street fair day, and I was, you know, wandering around, and I felt somebody tugging on my sleeve, and I looked down, and it was this little boy, and he said to me, you know, would you take my picture? And I said, sure. So it was very bright sun, and I was a very kind of soft face. So I said, let's look for a place. And so I saw this wall, and he stood there, and the whole thing was over very quickly. And he said, thank you. And I said, thank you. And we went our separate ways. But I just love the way he looked. I mean, it's like central casting with the shoe shine kit. And this was a time when there was that advertising campaign. And actually, one of the pictures is the boy wearing the shirt that says Hoboken is for lovers.
Right.
And also the I love, that's it, right. And also there was like the I love New York, and he has the sticker I love Hoboken.
Right.
So that was just lucky.
Right. We going back to this one, we actually like identified the year this sticker was created because an individual said, hey, that was his campaign to do that, and it probably was, you know, taken from a New York campaign, but it's Hoboken style. And I think the year was 1979, but I could be wrong. And you know, it was really common for young kids up until probably the mid 80s, 90s to, you know, do shoe shines, and they would hang out by the train stations. And, you know, not that many parents are going to say, hey, you know, go out and make some money doing shoe shine now. I don't think that's like too much of an option for parents. And of course, everyone has sneakers, it seems. So it kind of has changed that type of activity. And this picture is a little different too. I mean, it's more the direct approach than just like what's going on the street. And you handle them both really well.
Right. He was, you know, I just looked at him. I go, what a tremendous work ethic for a young kid on a Saturday to clearly be working. So he wasn't, it wasn't like a scene. He wasn't shining shoes. He, you know, he approached me. And so I had, you know, like really a short period of time, like seconds, to get this down. And because I knew that he was working, you know, he was going to go back to work.
Yeah. And it's funny, we do have this in the exhibit, but it's also in the main floor exhibit. And many people will talk about their experience as the shoe shine boy, and they'll talk about like the best place to go for shoe shines was the bar. And because the guys would be drinking and would be generous with change, and you know, they'd get kind of a great tip out of the whole thing. So that was the best thing. So let's see, Ivory Creations, very nostalgic for me. My family lived for many years on 14th Street. Pretty knew everyone in Hoboken. I was just a kid, but I remember a lot of camera crews recording at camera spots. So you might have connected with Lively Ivy there. Very cool. Thanks. Thank you. Hoboken is for lovers. You know, I wonder what the run was for that shirt. I don't think I'd ever seen this shirt before. And he's, do you think it's the same day as the shoe shine boy, or?
I don't think so. I think this was another area. And I think that I just saw him and we started talking.
Right. And just nice light, nice skin tone, a nice direct approach. And, you know, most people I meet who do the street photography, they don't handle, shall we say, more anonymous approach, which some of your photographs are, and then the direct approach. Usually they favor one or the other.
Mhm.
And you have both, which I think is pretty cool.
This was a series, and
Mm.
these kids were playing. I mean, they knew I was there, and they forgot about me after, you know,
Sure.
they're not going to stop playing the game because
Of
I'm
course.
there. So sometimes you just have to wait long enough till they go back to what they were originally doing.
Right, right.
So I don't even know what this game is.
It's Monster Mansion.
Oh,
Rand says Monster Mansion, a game that
uh-huh.
was not of my era, but we love that gesture.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
And I thought it was great that kids could just take a board game and put it on the sidewalk and play.
right. It's like their front yard.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so we're on Washington Street again on the west side. And I think we're looking at the Elysian Cafe sort of going forward there. And so what's that? The 1000 block, I guess. And I'm not going to remember what they're in front of. Is that Muller Insurance or right around there? But still have that diagonal parking. But now we have to back in. We have this new crazy system. We have to back in.
Mhm.
But yeah, you're right. Just that thinking, normally you would do this in the privacy of your home or backyard. But these, you know, you just don't think of your parents saying, go out and play on the sidewalk.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm.
I love that shot. Same thing. And these guys are recognizing you
Mhm.
for sure. And we're on Sinatra Drive, not like 2 blocks from here.
Mhm.
Maxwell House Coffee Factory would be to the right. And we have Elysian Park to the left, I would say. Anyway. And Hudson Street in the background.
Mhm.
And trying to think where they got these shopping carts from. I guess the closest shopping area would be the A&P on Washington Street, maybe, if it was still going at this
Sure.
time.
Possible.
Right, right. But it's pre-Kings, it's pre-Acme, and you can just see how that would be fun for kids,
Oh, yeah.
shopping carts.
And you know, those days kids didn't have all these activities that kids have today, where everything is very programmed.
Yep.
You know, in those days people just went outside and played, and they found whatever they could to play with, and they were just, you know,
Sure.
active.
Yeah, yeah. And big kids too.
Right.
And
So this is the same kind of situation where I would walk up, I would be, you know, wow, they're playing dominoes. And of course they would see me, and only one person is actually still looking at me.
right,
So I would just hang out long enough, hoping to lose, you know, like everyone's attention, to just, you know, get a picture of the activity.
right. We immediately recognize the gentleman on the right, good head of hair. That's Tom Oliveri with the mustache right
Oh,
there.
really?
Yeah, and he lived right across the street in the building with the, you know, wood grain door. And the family just recently sold. He's since passed,
Uh-huh.
but we worked with him on chapbooks and different
Oh,
exhibits
wow.
and tenant rights activists, and
Uh-huh.
just a great. He's actually in Delivered Vacant in
Oh,
the
really?
film.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'll have to see.
definitely.
But you can
definitely.
also see there are many more different kinds of people at this point in time. You
Yeah,
know?
sure. And I guess that's the wall. The wall is school to the left in the background, which is
Mhm.
still a school. And yeah, we're on Willow Avenue. Aha. And we're back on Washington Street.
Mhm.
And what did you like about this scene?
I like the number of people, and that it was, you know, I would say almost all these pictures were taken on weekends.
Right.
And so there were more, you know, people around, and that it was just, you know, people going out, doing their errands, hanging out, and just enjoying being outside.
And, you know, I think weekends that, like you said, there's more people out, so there's more things to look at. There's more things happening. Things are changing back and forth, and people usually there's a little more leisure going on. They're not on rushing to work, trying to catch a bus. And I think I hear that from a lot of street photographers. They prefer the weekends, and it fit into your schedule too, a little bit on there. And we see the attractive trash bunker in the center there. They always talk about Hoboken was lucky that it didn't have urban renewal in the 1970s, like a lot of cities, and they kind of bulldozed main streets. But I do remember those trash receptacles being like, whoa. And, many downtowns sort of almost had the look of that, that concrete look. And luckily we passed on that for sure. And that, I guess we're on that. We're looking on the east side from the number 231. Hoboken House was one of the restaurants. And during that time, there weren't that many restaurants on Washington Street. You might have a few ice cream type shops and luncheonettes, but people talk about you did not have outdoor dining. Like the idea of dining on the street was almost like, why would you do that? It's dirty. The air's not great. The buses go by. You'd rather be in the air conditioning or kind of a more defined area to eat your food. And these pictures do sort of show that, we're not seeing the street dining, which is something we really see now. Here's Eric again. Yes, great photos of dominoes, shopping carts, and growing up on Hoboken, making your own games. So Eric is reliving his 1970s and 80s period through your photos, for sure.
The best part is that even though there are lots of new buildings and big buildings, these low-rise buildings have remained.
That's right.
It's like, I would say in general, everything has been like very upscaled, but the basic aspects, visually.
Sure. Yeah. Washington Street is within a historic district. It did not get urban renewal, so that's good. So the old buildings survive and height restrictions apply. And if someone's going to do something to the facade of the buildings, they have to go through a process, not unlike the Village in New York, which has survived obviously a lot. And if those rules weren't in place, we would see a different streetscape for sure on there. And nice faces.
Yeah, I mean, they realized I was there, and I just, they were. I mean, I love the interaction between these women in the back, and you can see with the doll, and there, I would love to know who these kids were.
Right. Well, we're gonna find them. We're gonna find them.
I mean, just to see what what happened to them. Where did they stay in Hoboken? Right. Did they have to leave?
Sure.
What.
Right. We've done a few books on Hoboken earlier time period, and it takes time to kind of locate these people. But many times we're finding out, the person in the photo has moved on, but their child, who's now 25, 30, is here in Hoboken. It like skips a generation, and it's so interesting. And when they see a picture of their parent or that person age, they're just amazed. So that's part of the fun of seeing photos of this time period, because the people are still alive for the most part. Whether they're in Hoboken or we're going to find them is unknown.
Well, all of these children are all grown up now.
That's true.
They're all middle-aged people, and so
right. And that doll is vintage. It's a collector's item on there. And so, did you pretty much stick to Washington Street, or did you get around?
Because Hoboken I thought was very safe, even areas that didn't, like there weren't a lot of people. I mean, Washington Street's a main street, so there's always going to be people. But there are other streets that were not, as active. So I would just wander around. I mean, I had my map. Having a grid makes everything really easy.
Right.
And so it wasn't just Washington Street. Sometimes I would just like walk up Bloomfield Street or walk up Garden Street because I didn't want it to just be Washington Street.
Right, right, right. Yeah, this looks like a loading dock for a factory building. I don't think it is Washington Street, but we have it's a little tight, so it's a little hard to figure it out.
It is. Now remember, it is a loading dock.
Right. It just has that feeling, and the looks like the button by the door, like push for service, that kind of thing. And like kids adapt. If it's on the weekend, loading dock's not being used, that's a great place to hang out, you know, so I'm there. Ively, Hoboken in the 70s photography book, which is a book we produced. My godfather is in the book as the town mechanic, looking to see if I recognize anyone. Your photography is absolutely stunning.
Thank you so much.
That's
very
cool.
kind.
Yes, definitely. And I know the mechanic picture you're talking about. It is a great shot in this other book. We really liked him. Any memory from this photo?
You know, I don't speak Spanish.
Right.
And so, you know, I teach English, you know, to non-English speakers. And if I had known I was going to do that, and I was going to be spending this time in Hoboken, maybe I would have learned Spanish instead of French. So I don't think I was really able to communicate much, but I think that he knew what I wanted to do, and he was, you know, cooperative.
Right.
Unfortunately, you know, I didn't have a Polaroid where I could take a picture of someone and then give them a Polaroid.
Right.
That would have been the ideal situation, to be able to give them a picture of themselves.
Right.
And I, you know, and because it's film, there was nothing. I mean, now you look at your picture right away, you know, and
Yep.
And you send it to somebody and they have it. So, is this Washington Street? I really can't tell.
We're not sure. I don't think it is, but I'm not going to say 100%. Seems like more like a storefront on Willow, Clinton, but I don't know. And you know, we do have the old phone books, but a lot of times people didn't have a phone that was like a phone listing. They might just have a pay phone inside. We haven't really researched it, but there were a lot of stores like that when you know, they just had a few basic things inside and not a lot of inventory. But so we're not sure. We're not sure.
The condition of the sidewalk makes me think that it may not be Washington Street.
Right.
So, you know,
sure.
it's hard to know exactly.
But it's funny. When we were thinking about it, Uptown Washington, like from 11th Street up to 14th Street, was a lot of empty storefronts and a lot of, you know, the sidewalk was a mess and boarded up stores. And I think most people will be shocked by that, to think of that, but it's true. The nicer housing stock is uptown, but the storefronts on Washington were not really, you know, being utilized.
I liked his red pants.
Yes.
And I like the fact that he's sitting on that crate.
Yeah.
And he looks very dignified.
He does. He's very proud. Yeah, definitely. And you just know he's the store owner, right? Runs the store. And tell me about these gals.
Well, when I was reading some things I wrote, I said, Hoboken has a lot of kids named Anthony. That was one thing I
Anthony and Maria
noticed from being around. And that, like, if you did something, like, your mother would know before you got home.
You hear that a lot. Yeah.
So to me, it's like these are people who are, you know, catching each other up on, you know, whatever is new in their lives. And I like the fact that there were two what looked like maybe high school girls and then the two older women.
Right.
Kind of
It's funny. I didn't notice her.
each other.
Irene Corman, who's a great gal, loves this picture.
Thank you.
And she may even recognize the awning on the building. She was an uptown girl. So, yeah, this would have been like Hoboken's senior aristocracy, the way they're dressed, those big purses. And you can see their sort of I'm not going to say spreading gossip, but, you know, they're kind of sharing information for sure. And I didn't even really notice the two girls in the background, just with the depth of field.
Now, in a situation like this, it looks like I just used a long lens and I did not interact with them at all.
Yeah, no, definitely. But that I know that look. I know those scarves,
Uh-huh.
and that's it. Just I mean, yeah. One of my favorite shots, also, and very red.
I saw this red building and I was like, this must be the reddest building in Hoboken.
Right.
And I have to wait. And I actually like waited because I knew that something would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I waited across the street, and this was like maybe an 80 to 200 lens. And then these people came out, and I wanted them to be in that part of the picture. I didn't want to center them. And this is Washington Street, isn't it?
I haven't really scrutinized it.
I'd have to look for
I
these.
think it is, but
Uh-huh.
I couldn't really tell you what block. It could be other blocks too. Willow has flats like this,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm thinking it might not be Washington.
Okay.
But I can't go on the line. I love the red wheels on the carriage.
Uh-huh.
Kind of work. And so how long do you think you would have waited for your moment here?
It would just, I mean, I like the light, and
Yeah.
I could have waited there for, several minutes,
Yeah,
and maybe
sure.
other people walked by. But if it was, say, a single person walking by, it wouldn't have interested me as much as having a group of people,
Right.
and that they're interacting with each other.
Sure. Very cool. And we're moving on. So again, the direct approach. Most people aren't going to know where this is taken because that has totally changed. Do you remember anything from the moment?
That was the first day that I was in Hoboken.
The first day.
Very first day.
Wow.
And I remember seeing them, and I remember thinking like that was an interesting building, and that whole ironwork.
Sure.
And I think I just started talking to them, and I said, "Can I take your picture?"
Right.
And they said, they might have said like, "Where?" And I said like, "Right here."
So the building in the background it says Hoboken Port Authority Piers, but the building is actually much older than the Port Authority. It was known as the Head House, and it goes back to the day when Hoboken was a more active port, and the two German ocean liners, North German Lloyd and Hamburg American, docked behind these buildings. So these buildings were kind of like storage sheds for cargo for the ships. And at a certain point, these buildings would have been used in World War I to transport men to go fight the Germans in France. But it was pretty much became government property from World War I onward. So these gates are pretty much a symbol of like, you can't get past this, and this is not your public access, and so on and so on. So these buildings are eventually torn down. The gate comes down, but then you had building projects such as the W Hotel and things like that. So it did go high rise, but luckily the walkway is in front of that. So there is public access, but there wasn't for probably 50 years or more. But it's sort of like, that iron gate is pretty formidable for sure. But I like the shot, partly because of the location too, for me. And again, these kids, we're going to find them. They're adults and they have families with kids who could be older than this.
Right.
Yeah. So Miss Senior Citizen Pageant, dated 1978.
It has an exact date on it.
Yeah, so we know the date. Donation $1. Sponsored by the Hotel Retail Bureau. Yeah, Hoboken Retail Bureau. So kind of like a Washington Street booster thing, and that must be the city bus. And the multi-service is still there at 124 Grand Street. and building a little bit frozen in time. And it's a great shot. And we were talking about this earlier. We're not sure if the remnants of that barbershop pole are still there. I'm going to give you a ride back down to the path.
Oh,
And
thank you so
we'll
much.
find out.
Okay.
We'll stop by for sure.
I noticed that there are still storefronts like this that have these big glass windows.
Yeah.
Um,
Again, there's that historic district, so they
Mhm.
do try to retain some of that. And we've won some, we've lost some. But I think this storefront is still pretty intact.
mhm.
Not a barber shop, but it's gone through different things. And we think we even know who that person is.
Oh,
He's
really?
long gone, but
Uh-huh.
we think he might be from the Kirschgessner family, who
Uh-huh.
ran a store right next door,
Uh-huh.
because we knew his son, and they look kind of similar.
Uh-huh.
It's a long shot.
I think it's great you set up a chair on the sidewalk to watch the world go by.
Yeah. And his son, George, always did that with his wife, Dolores.
Uh-huh.
And I would say he learned it from his father. And that's when you know you're comfortable in your town,
Uh-huh.
I think.
And people can pass by and talk
Yeah,
to you. And,
Yeah,
you know.
definitely. The Stoopers.
Yeah. So this
So
is
our-
where Manhattan is so close yet so far.
Yes, definitely. I think it's 1.5 miles, 1.75 miles across. But do you think this is with a telephoto lens, a little compression?
A little compression.
Yeah, definitely.
And
definitely.
I have other photos where kids used to go crabbing.
Sure. Or swimming.
Yeah. And they would have these little like cages, and they would throw the cages in, and they would
Yeah.
pull out crabs.
They'll still do it.
But it was at a time when the Hudson was really polluted.
Right. They
So-
say it's much cleaner now,
Uh-huh.
and you could swim in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I don't see too many people swimming in it, but it's supposedly cleaner than it's been in many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before the waterfront walkway. And, many times the concrete base that made up the piers was all fractured and crumbling because it
Mhm.
wasn't maintained. So you sort of had to be careful. Sometimes you had to go through a hole in the fence to get out to the
Mhm.
waterfront. And of course, the New York skyline is just incredibly changed with
Mhm.
Hudson Yards,
Right.
all the finger skyscrapers and so
Mhm.
on. Yeah, Eric's sort of noting that it has changed a lot also.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can see the Chrysler building, which I don't think you can see anymore
Mhm.
from this vantage point. It's blocked. There it is again. A lot of activity out there. Even the strollers have changed, right?
Everything is changing every day. You just don't realize it.
That's right. But when we look at your pictures, a lot of things scream out. It looks like the piers in New York are still active. Most of those piers have all fallen in disrepair. And so we said there were so many kids. I mean, we have a lot of kids now too. The kid thing has sort of come back,
Mhm.
but to see them all framed in the window like that, kind of the makeshift window guards,
Right. Exactly. So
which
make
would
sure.
not pass code probably then or now,
Right.
but it's kind of interesting how kids adapt.
Yeah.
It's a nice shot. And sort of great angel pose.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you like about this picture?
You don't see things like this in the suburbs. You don't see people standing in a window looking out
Right.
and wanting to know what's happening on the street. And
Sure.
somebody walks by that you know. And so you're always interacting with your environment, which is not always the case, And the thing about Hoboken is it's like I always like the scale of it. That, people had a lot of opportunities to interact because of the human scale.
I think that's really true. And being in New York, you kind of pick that up even quicker, probably,
Mhm.
because it's a contrast
Right.
to New York. I love this shot because of the light, really soft light, and it is almost like she has angel wings.
Mhm.
And in fact, on her shirt, it's not wings, but it almost looks like a wing kind of motif. But something about that lace
Mhm.
and the positioning of her in the center like that, and the lace kind of acting like a butterfly or wings, makes it really special.
Mhm.
And she's got the ring on her finger, and there's something really. She's just I don't know. It's youth, it's the future, and then you have that old door, the old window frame. A lot of really interesting textures, I think.
You know, I probably never talked to her. I probably just like waved at her,
Sure,
and
sure,
she realized I was there, and then she
right,
just she just stood there.
sure, sure. And it looks like that would be pretty much on street level, just from the angle. So
Mhm.
she's in her first floor window or
Right.
apartment or something like that. So yeah, beautiful shot.
Thank you.
Beautiful shot. So we are coming to the end.
Mhm.
Again, the name of the exhibit is called When We Were Young.
Mhm.
It opens on Sunday. This is sort of a prelude to it, a teaser. And it will be running from, again, Sunday, July 10th to September 4th. And we are so lucky that you reached out to us with that initial shoe shine boy shot. And I hope this has been a good experience to you.
I feel so lucky because I just had this one picture that I thought the origin of this big 30 by 40 print was when I worked at this photography magazine. The editor came in to me one day and said, "There's this company that says that they can make a 30 by 40-inch print and it will look sharp." And he said, "Can you give me a picture?" And I gave him the Hoboken Shoe Shine Boy.
That's so
and that
fun.
was the origin of that.
Right.
And then I thought to myself, maybe the museum would be interested in it. And so this was like such a fortunate thing, which I'm really grateful for. I really appreciate
That's so
it because
funny. Yeah.
it just happened very naturally.
Yeah.
And
sure. And Ively, who I got to find out who Ively is, email me at info@hobokenmuseum.org. You are absolutely right. It was quite the common scene of folks talking to each other from one window to another, or having conversations with friends passing by, even if the window was high up. So window culture. Eric Hammer, fantastic show. I will see you Sunday.
Good.
And Eric doesn't even live in Hoboken, but he is so Hoboken focused.
I look forward to meeting you, Eric.
Yeah. Irene chiming in again. Thank you for such a great walk down memory lane. Can't wait to visit the exhibit. And do you want to give a shout out to your good friend, Alan?
Yes. I have a very good friend, Alan Rubin, and he was living in the city. And for years, I was, telling him about Hoboken. And at a certain point, he just wanted to leave Manhattan. So he came to Hoboken. Now he's been here for decades. And he's also originally from New Jersey, but he didn't really know anything about Hoboken because New Jersey can be a very kind of Balkanized state.
Vulcanized. I like that term.
And so, you really have to say, okay, today I'm going to explore this. So he loves it here. I don't think he would ever live anywhere else. He just said, this place is my speed,
Right. And Alan introduced himself to the museum a few weeks ago. He came in and he said, "I'm a friend of Carol's." And he said, "Carol is the reason I'm here. When I saw her photographs, I was charmed, and I just had to visit. And when I did, I said, I'm moving to Hoboken." And that was 40 years ago, maybe something, 35, 40 years, something. And you worked with him as a kind of photographer, photo editor?
Well, after I left the photography magazine I was working at, I started working at the Village Voice.
Okay.
And he was the assistant editor of the Village Voice.
Right.
So from there, I went to various newspapers.
Sure. And that was with Fred
McDarrah. I was
one of kind of a legend.
Yes, he was definitely a legend.
He was everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
He was real,
Sure. Anyway, I'm just going to give
Thank
a
you
great
so
shake.
much.
This is wonderful.
Really been
and
a pleasure.
We're going to go check out that store to see if the barbershop pole is still there.
Okay.
Okay. And we are signing off. Oh, I'm sorry. We did want to thank some of our sponsors. We get some funds from Hudson County Office of Cultural and Heritage Affairs, and they sponsor the Upper Gallery exhibits. And thank you, Hudson County. And again, in addition to Carol's exhibit in the Upper Gallery, we do have the Avenue exhibit, A History of Washington Street. And actually, Carol's work is in both exhibits, downstairs and upstairs, and it's definitely worth checking out the duo exhibits. Thanking our Shipyard Circle, who are all sponsors of the museum through our different appeals, and we couldn't do it without them. And in addition, Hoboken Talks, which is sort of the compendium of this show, will be interviewing April Harris, which I'll be doing, and that's next Thursday. And after that, Michael Turner will be interviewed by the popular Stu Ciccarella. So we've had a great run with these video broadcasts, and we know we have some loyal listeners. Please spread the word and check out archive shows on YouTube. We'd love for you to check in. And you can subscribe to YouTube, sign up, text in, and really spread the word about this show. And I'll say Hoboken culture, which we do have a culture. So again, thank you very much. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Rand Hupp, for doing the program, engineering the program. And I meant to say Rand Hoppe. I'll correct myself. I seem to be having some word challenges today. I'm just tired. Anyway, great show.